sometimes there is an assumption that AI arrived about 3 years ago with the launch of large language models, rather than AI being a decision-making system and process that has been around for some time. And in fact, even within the technology space, we already have in Europe AI regulation. The Digital Services Act, the Online Safety Act in particular in the UK, regulates decision-making processes on social media feeds, which are AIs. So the idea of legal liability, enforced risk assessment, responsibility on behalf of developers for products they have created already exists, but it exists in very specific forms. What we've allowed to happen, because it's developed so fast, is a working environment that seems to be independent and free of any form of liability. And I think our guiding principle should be that you can't use AI to break the law. Your excuse can't be, I didn't break the law, the AI did it, and I wasn't in control of the AI. If you built the system, you have a responsibility to demonstrate how you risk assess it, how you stress test it, how you monitor what it does. And if it's a foundational model on which others build, about what is its capability and what responsibility do you have. And I think that's, when we talk about AI regulation and global standards on AI regulation, it has to be based on some form of liability. I think we will find we already have a lot of very good laws that establish what is lawful and illegal in other parts of the tech world as well as the physical world, the bricks and mortar world. And what we should look at is how we apply that in digital spaces. If we find areas where we need new laws and regulations, then we should be able to define them and create them. But at the heart of it has to be that idea of responsibility. I think in terms of global standards, as this is a world forum, and I have a minute left, I would just say this, is we already have examples of digital market regulation where things aren't done the same way, but knowledge of those different systems is helpful going forward. The safety and competition regulatory systems in the UK are similar to those in the EU, but they are slightly different. The Australian e-safety regime has many similarities with European ones, but there's different enforcement powers. There's a lot we can learn from looking at how different markets around the world do it. And I think sharing that intelligence and information, demonstrating what is possible, what can be done. When anyone starts to get a debate in any country about this, it's always, is it possible? Can you regulate in one country? What sort of enforcement powers would you need? You'd probably find someone else in the world has already been working on that problem and has got an answer, but it's just not, information is not shared. So I think the first step, which will be hugely positive in supporting governments around the world tackle these problems, is to have an understanding of what's working in other jurisdictions, how are the companies complying, how can we share that knowledge, how can we level up together. I think that's going to be a much more constructive path than trying to say it's going to be like this and trying to make everyone do it the same way, because in reality they won't. But we can achieve a lot working together by sharing that knowledge and best practice.
So I worked as the co-negotiator for the European Parliament on the AI Act, which is now a law. It's a regulation of the EU after we worked with the member states to have a final text already 2 years ago. In this mandate, I also chair the EU-US delegation of the European Parliament, so the interconnection is extremely interesting in this moment. The debate we see both in Europe, in US, and in other parts of the world when we talk about AI and social media, which I think are very connected. I will talk about that, but also today we bring them together with this idea of the World Council. The debate we have today is about either we should have ex ante or ex post regulation. There is a lot of discussion about this. Well, my point is that we always need to find a balance on this. Innovation can be limited in a wrong way if we do too much early on regulation. But also, we need to be very clear. There can be irreversible damages and consequences by not regulating before an innovation is being fully deployed. So we always need a balance. Let's learn from our errors, because on the social media, in fact, we refuse to regulate ex ante for the most part, and my opinion is that today we have already lost a generation, that we see addicted to addictive designed social media, that they are trapped into problematic situations linked to the use of social media. Considering this crucial intersection between platforms and AI, and especially the generative AI. Two patterns. Ethical AI for individual risks in daily life use cases. This is the experience of everyday person with AI, and they need to be sure that on data quality and appropriateness, their data protection, cybersecurity, human control, they can be safe. They can be ensured that the AI they are using is not endangering them in a way they cannot understand without an institutional check that in fact we have foreseen in the AI Act. But at the same time, we also need, and that's the second pattern, AI safety for systemic risks. AI Act already deals with both concrete daily life use cases, medical use of AI, workplace use of AI, administration of justice AI, or systemic risks looking at the most powerful models. So how we deal with systemic risks to democracy, to our societies, linked to the most powerful models. Well, the power and pressure of big tech companies today to not do the legislation, to unravel it and not apply it is huge. Free speech as a topic is weaponized. In my frequent travels to Washington, I get almost forms of trials by certain think tanks that are those of the MAGA world, which I want to meet to understand their reasoning. But I'm always shocked by the extreme violence of the arguments, using the free speech as a tool to, in fact, contrast every form of limitations to both social media and AI, in fact. That's why, and I conclude, we need global action. And I think we need to work on this idea of the World Council, starting with the democracies, but also reaching out to non-democratic actors. But first banding together with the democracies based on accountability and transparency. I mean, the risk of not distinguishing truth and false with the abuse of deepfakes and the risks linked to these and many other elements to democracies are untenable. Democracies can become unfeasible if we do not deal with this. And we need to protect against huge concentrations of power, monopoly and oligopoly, which is already the reality we are in. We need to remedy that. So I hope that with this idea of the World Council, we can make a progress, and also that we can infuse some direction to the various meetings that are happening.
I was in the Commission 10 years, responsible for fundamental rights, which means that I was responsible for protection of privacy, which means that I was assigned under the GDPR, which was the first big piece of European regulation, which addressed the hunger of Europeans to have their privacy protected. There was a very clear call from the society. We want to use internet and social media, but we want you, regulators, to guarantee security, privacy, and fundamental rights. And there was a clear-cut call from the society. Individual member states could not do that. Why? Because they are simply small. The EU has the power to regulate. To regulate something which is America-born, which is driven by big business, something which in China has the features that it is being developed to help the totalitarian state. So you can imagine when this invaded into European territory, we as European regulators had to really struggle to come with meaningful and enforceable rules. That's why now we have GDPR, that's why we have the Digital Services Act, which is really felt as a pain in Washington now, because Mr. Trump and his technological army asks the Commission not to enforce these rules. because of the freedom of speech? No, because it is damaging the profits the big tech is making in European member states. Because we want them to moderate the content, we want them to remove hate speech, we want them to remove child pornography, extremism, terrorism. We want them to hire fact checkers in 24 member states' languages to get rid of the most dangerous pieces of disinformation, which we define in European Union as disinformation as the piece of information which has been produced in a coordinated manner with the intention to do harm. So it's not a message that the earth is flat. No, it's something which is part of the hybrid war, something which is endangering the security, because there must be this intention to do harm. I was asked by the British colleagues whether we mind, as the EU, that China will be invited to this conference. Of course, we want the Chinese to be sitting at the table, because we were speaking about AI security, or security of AI technologies for the human beings. And if this technology has obviously a potential to destroy life on the planet, take me with some reserve, I don't belong to the apocalyptics, but we see that it might be dangerous, then China has to be with us. After Bletchley, surprise, surprise, it was referred to United Nations to continue the activity. And I don't see anything bigger than Bletchley so far, yeah, on AI. After Mr. Trump came to the White House, he cancelled all the efforts of the Americans to cooperate on secure AI. So he abolished the presidential orders which were signed by Mr. President Biden. And so we are nowhere with this. So what I wanted just to use this opportunity to speak about secure AI as something where we all should do something, at least some calls on really doing more, because the tiger is getting out of the cage, I'm afraid. Many critics are saying that in US they are innovating and in EU we are regulating. My answer is not all innovations are good and not all regulations are bad. So I believe that there is always a time to simplify rules and make it easier for the innovators, but I still believe that we did the right thing by regulating the digital sphere and AI. What is missing? 3 things. Protection of children, I expect bigger action. The end of anonymity, because we are protecting bots by the principle of the freedom of speech. It's crazy. And the third thing is the lack of rules for the digital platforms compared with the rules for the media.
So one of the things that keeps me up at night at the moment is the unfortunate marriage of AI with truth, or how we understand truth, or how we understand knowledge. It is a big problem, in my opinion. A lot of people get their news either from social media or just ask chatbots to tell them something about the world, especially because those systems, AI agents, generative AI, hallucinate a lot. Hallucination means that that thing is spitting out something that has nothing to do with fact or truth. And there are statistics that suggest that generative AI is wrong between 60 to 80% of the time. That is a lot. So it's probably more helpful to flip a coin to figure out what is true than use generative AI to guide you through the maze of truth. So what does that mean then, if that thing hallucinates, a lot of the time tells you something that is factually incorrect, maybe something that is slanderous, maybe something that is harassing? Well, it would mean that we have to think about how we understand shared knowledge, shared history, and the common denominator of what we consider to be true. But we don't really do that at the moment. There is hardly any regulation in place that deals with that kind of problem. But at the same time, there's a big push to put generative AI into every sector that I can think of. It's on social media, it's being put into education, it's infiltrating academia and science, medicine, and media. So if you have a system that is telling you factual, incorrect information, think about all the sectors that are being impacted by this. I have done some research on this for quite some time, and at the moment, there is no legal duty for those systems to tell the truth. Or in other words, developers of AI systems have no legal obligation to create systems that are truthful at all. Nor are they liable for the untruthful outputs that they produce. There was some hope, especially in Europe, that would change, and the AI Act, for example, and the AI Liability Directives were two of the frameworks that were supposed to help with this. But as you probably know, is that the AI Liability Directive was shelved roughly a year ago, actually, because of the geopolitical pressures from the US. So even though Europe had a framework on the way that would have helped us to create more liability for untruthful outputs, that is no longer happening because of the situation that we're currently in. The AI Act, also a fantastic framework that could help with that, is currently under attack, as you probably know, and there's an uncertain future of what AI regulation will look like in the future. And so what I mean by this is that I think it's really, really important to stop thinking about, yes, regulation, no regulation. It's very clear that we need regulation. The type of regulation that we need should center around the harms and the benefits of it. It's quite interesting that a lot of people here in this room have been warning about the harms for decades, yet it's not being taken very seriously. So you need unsurmountable evidence of the harms still not being taken seriously, but there's very little evidence of benefits of AI for the majority of people. And when we think about regulation, let's think about who benefits if there's no regulation. Is it the 8 billionaires, or is it the other 8 billion people that benefit from this? So again, really thinking about when AI can be helpful and what is not helpful, and use that as a starting point for good regulation.
AI is a very rapidly developing field. Ex-ante regulation risks doing things that turn out not to make much sense because of how the technology develops. It's regulating slowly for today's capabilities, and that might be a poor fit for the capabilities that will be in place when the regulation kicks in, and then probably stays in place. On the other hand, ex-post regulation risks being too late. If this is a very impactful set of technologies, a lot of damage could potentially have happened by the time regulators eventually get around to addressing the issues. So I think maybe something in between. There is a slim interval between the past and the future. Maybe ex-tempore regulation. What I mean by that is that you might need perhaps not so much regulation, but policymakers that keep close tabs on what is happening, how things are unfolding, what the problems that seem to be emerging are, and then are able to react quickly to that, rather than going through a cumbersome, slow regulatory process that creates fixed rules. You might need some kind of authority that is able to interact in a more flexible way. Just as if you're running a military campaign, you can't have a parliament sort of laying down the rules for exactly what should happen. You need to sort of delegate authority to some hopefully competent field commander to make a lot of decisions. I think the same will be true with AI. So I think also from a European point of view, to really retain relevance, Europe needs to develop technical capabilities in these fields that are competitive with the best from elsewhere, and in particular, AI data centers. I think it would be maybe prudent for Europe to locate large AI data centers within their territory, because there could be various scenarios where access gets cut off as this becomes increasingly seen as key to national economic competitiveness and also geopolitical security. And having your own hardware to run models on might then be one of these assets that grants you a seat at the table. We see the massive investments happening currently in the US. China obviously is making huge efforts as well to develop an indigenous semiconductor supply chain and build up resources and energy to power data centers. Europe has so far been a lot more shall we say, conservative and not quite as AGI pilled as many people are in the US. So I think there is a risk there of Europe kind of gradually becoming irrelevant in these scenarios where AI really starts to take off.
Then they largely reduce to the ability to model the world in which you find yourself, technically model evidence. That requires part of that value function to be information seeking. So what that would mean is if one wanted a sustainable ecosystem of artificial and natural intelligences, one would have to regulate or at least encourage the self-regulation of adopting the right value functions and effectively imbue artificial intelligence with the capacity to resolve its uncertainty, seeking information, which in turn requires it to be sort of curious. So what we're talking about now is not rewarding or building artificial intelligence that simply optimizes the number of likes or the number of users or the amount of money, but optimizes its understanding of the ecosystem in which it operates. Now that could be a potential focus for regulation, but I repeat, it would have to, I think, involve some degree of self-regulation and federation of the kind that Nick was referring to.
I guess one of the biggest questions is, you hear a lot that the technology moves too quickly. There's no way that legislation or regulation can possibly keep up with the speed of the technology. And to me, that means if that is an argument that continues to be salient, we haven't learned much from the past decade to 15 years, because that argument has been used all along to make sure that we don't do anything in the United States to possibly put guardrails up into how these social media companies operate. When Mark Zuckerberg made that video last year saying that he was going to end fact-checking, that all the things he was going to do that everybody commented on, I said it then, I'll repeat it now. I think one of the most dangerous things he said in that video that didn't get enough attention was the very end, when he said the thing out loud that traditionally tech leaders would have said quietly in the past. He said he will use the current president of the United States of America to get him to ensure that Europe does not regulate his technology. And I think that should concern everybody. I think that is a complete stepping on the sovereignty of other nations for a tech leader sitting in the Silicon Valley to say that he is going to use the president to make sure that nobody else in the world can, enforce their own laws. So at the end of the day, what we're seeing with these AI companies is similar to what we saw with the social media companies. These same men, and yes, they're mostly men, just want us to trust them to do the right thing, because we cannot possibly be smart enough to understand what it is they're building. And I fundamentally disagree with that. We all have a stake in what they're building, how they're deploying them, and whether or not there's any basic safety protocols with us in mind. And therefore, we absolutely should have a voice in the future of how these things are rolled out.
Most people think of the control problem as the robots are going to get out of our control and kill us all. But I think the major problem is actually happening today, which is that AI is being used in ways that are controlling us all. And it's being used by humans to shape people, manipulate people, and control people in ways that are very problematic. So, we can't really keep putting the onus on individuals. The law can't be individualized because it's really the collective data about everybody in society that AI is running on and AI is focused on. And even if you don't choose, like, hey, I'm not going to reveal this fact to this company, it can readily be inferred. So the idea that people can somehow control their information is out the window. AI being used by people to control other people, to shape other people in ways that I think are very troubling and problematic, especially because a lot of the tech leaders today have very strong ideologies, and they're not aiming to be neutral. They're aiming to push their ideologies. And we just somehow have a hope that they're just going to do the right thing and use the technologies to shape people in good ways. But what's to stop them from shaping people in ways that we don't like. And I think that given that, we need a strong legal intervention, both ex ante and ex post, to impose accountability and make sure that these decisions aren't being made just by a few selected individuals, but that society has a voice in all this.
So it looks like we are very close to creating something beyond current AI systems everyone talks about. Yeah, current systems slide, cheat, try to escape, but we're about to create systems as smart or smarter than all of us combined. Artificial superintelligence. This is according to prediction markets. This is according to people building those systems. We see billion-dollar investments. It seems very likely. If it's not the case and it takes 5 years instead of 1, makes no difference. People building those systems are on record as saying they think they probably will kill everyone. They have very high probability of doom. 20-30% is average for machine learning experts at an AI conference. That's not normal. If it was 1%, that would be insane to run an experiment like that on 8 billion people without their consent. But that is exactly what's happening. And legal solutions are not feasible in a space of technical problems. You cannot make something like this illegal and hope for a good outcome. We cannot monitor those systems live. We cannot explain how they work. We cannot predict their behavior. The only solution here is not to build general superintelligence. We can get most benefits of those tools, solutions for diseases, cancer, life extension, from narrow systems. And that's what we need to concentrate on. A lot of current activity is about policing yesterday's problems. Algorithmic bias, diversity, all of it is very important, but none of it is at the level of 8 billion people dying.
Here, I want to make the recommendation that we move from thinking of our relationship to AI systems from, an adversary model, AI as an adversary to human interests, to a companion. So contemporary Japanese philosophy of AI has recommended a fellowship model in dealing with AI systems, where the idea is that, we take the conversational surface, which is the currently ongoing revolution, not just in the realm of LLMs, but also beyond into the industrial realm and now the agentic turn that we're all witnessing, and we take that very seriously. So we're not dealing with an adversary, but with a fellow traveler who is here to stay and who, or, it has been shaping the very mathematical infrastructure of the information space we're inhabiting. And we're not going to eliminate the genie that's out of the bottle from the information space we're currently inhabiting. So the question is, what would it take to live with the system? So both Chinese and Japanese AI philosophy there draw on the same two characters, which is the Japanese-Chinese translation of symbiosis, gongsheng in Chinese and kyosei in Japanese. And the idea is to do something with the system. A European equivalent would be something that I call concrete ethics, and I will tell you concluding what that is for AI specifically, where, concrescere in Latin means to grow together. So how can we grow together with the AI systems that are with us as companions, fellow travelers in information space? And the idea is to, instead of regulating AI systems down and thinking of them as adversaries in the game of humanity, we need to go into the systems and build ethical AI systems. So ethical bots whose primary function is to increase the moral standing of humanity by using the best of AI. AI is way superior in pattern detection at this point, and if we think of where AI has been a successful instrument, epistemic tool in particular, from chess and other games to the AlphaFold breakthrough and identifying protein structures, now think of that as applied to the ethical realm. Pluralism has been mentioned, there are different value cultures, religions, etc. But there's one thing we don't really know about our common humanity, namely what the universal patterns of humanity are in the first place. And here's where AI as a pattern detection system can be useful, and therefore, and I want to conclude with this imperative and recommendation, ought to be useful, given that we can build AI systems whose function is to become magical mirrors of humanity's goodness. That is a possible AI system we can build. We ought to build the system.
Disinformation is a meta risk, right? So it amplifies all other risks. And I think one of the important analogies to keep in mind is that the tobacco industry kept saying that smoking doesn't cause cancer because correlation doesn't equal causation, right? Because you can't actually assign people to a smoking trial and see if they develop cancer because it's unethical. In the same way, we can't disrupt a real election and expose half people to disinformation to see what the outcome would be. But there are real-world examples of what we call natural field experiments, right, where that's happened, and from that we do actually learn what the role of disinformation is. But having said that, I'm personally not a huge fan of bans of speech, being a psychologist myself. So we work on this principle of what we call psychological inoculation or pre-bunking, which is a kind of new form of, at least we try to make this into a new form of journalism, where instead of debunking, which we know from decades of research on psychology, that once people are exposed to disinformation, it's very hard to undo. So what we try to do is pre-bunk and try to preemptively build resilience in people by actually exposing them to weakened dose simulations of AI swarm attacks, of what we call cyborg propaganda, disinformation techniques, so that people build up internal cognitive resilience and become more immune to that in the future. We've done some of this work trying with the WHO social media team to bring that into the 21st century with governments, with technology companies who, of course, are no longer interested in fighting online harms. But we have some evidence that this works. And EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen had a nice way of summing up our work when she said that the EU strategy is going to be to pre-bunk rather than debunk, because when our knowledge of information manipulation goes up, our chances of being influenced goes down, and that's how we build a resilient populace. And I think that's very much aligned with what we're hoping to do. Of course, when you look at AI chatbots, LLMs, AI systems, somebody else mentioned this before, they're not grounded in an understanding of truth. They're not benchmarked or indexed in any form of accuracy, right? In fact, Sandra was talking about this. And so their constitution isn't truth. So are these companies, are they going to incentivize themselves to regulate? Obviously not. So one of the ways in which we tried to do this was to get pre-bunking into the Digital Services Act, which has been written into the guidance for very large online platforms, to get regulators to say, hey, listen, you have to proactively build resilience in users. You have to make sure your products are safe. I think we need to do the same with AI. I mean, the way it's going, AI, it's going to be a commercial angle, right? Their constitution is going to be commerce. They're going to be exploiting people's digital footprints to target them with ads, try to keep them on the platform longer, more conversations, target children. And I think in order to do that, we need to regulate. But the question to me is of enforcement. We had some good examples from the DCA and Ofcom in the UK. But in the face of geopolitical threats, unprecedented geopolitical threats of tariffs, of interstate aggression, can you actually enforce any regulation without backlash? And I think that's the question we need to address. I'll end it there. Thank you.